As for what is not true, you will always find abundance in the newspapers. Thomas Jefferson, 1806. After dealing with the Marietta Daily Journal and owner-publisher Otis Brumby, Jr. for 30 years reporting on both the city and myself, I have found this to be true. I have generally ignored the Marietta Daily Journal. I found it better not to respond to it in its factual inaccuracies. Why speak out now? The recent attacks by Otis Brumby, Jr. and the Marietta Daily Journal have become more outrageous and vicious. Additionally, he has taken to attacking the staff of the city. Staff are not in a good position to defend themselves from attack. Mr. Brumby should stick to the elected officials if he has to attack. Mr. Brumby has been increasingly vicious in his use of and remarks in Bill Kinney's Around Town column, as well as news stories. He should have the honesty, integrity, and dignity to put his own name and picture with his venomous words. He shouldn't usurp the column of a 83-year-old respected journalist, use his name and reputation, and besmirch it with such garbage, falsehoods, and vitriolic attack. I've seen Otis Brumby, Jr. attack issues where the government has encouraged or supported a business project with some type of government funding or help. The MDJ should shine the light on its own dealings for a change. It should be upfront, honest, and non-hypocritical. How many of us have read the railings against public contracts, how or where money is to be spent, or government help on a project? Subsidy, as Mr. Brumby would call it, if it was for someone else. In 1995, Mr. Brumby asked Cobb County for a low-interest loan for $3.6 million to expand the Marietta Daily Journal and buy a new printing press, which was denied. He then went to the Marietta Development Authority and received a $3 million loan. He was treated fairly, as any other citizen in Marietta would be treated, and yes, received government help or subsidy. As readers know, Mr. Brumby is an avid proponent of open records. However, when it comes to his own business, he falls silent. Otis Brumby and the Marietta Daily Journal are likely recipients of one of the largest regular local government supplements or government mandates, that being the legal ads that generates a large portion of revenue for the Marietta Daily Journal. Nowhere have I seen reported the meetings awarding the contract for the legal ads. Isn't this part of the public's business? From what I was told, it has been approximately 12 years since the contract for legal ads was reviewed and a public meeting held on it. Maybe it is time for a public meeting and a request for proposals. One of the questions that should be raised: shouldn't the official status of legal organ go to a responsible paper? Recently, the Marietta Daily Journal reported on issues relating to leasing in downtown Marietta. By way of disclosure, Otis Brumby, Jr. is a tenant of mine via the Brumby Chair Company, and although I usually do not discuss my private business, I make an exception here because it is that tenant's owner that has attacked me. The MDJ recently published items relating to leasing that Mr. Brumby personally knows are not true. As his landlord, I know that to be the case. Former Councilman Johnny Sinclair commented, he, Goldstein, can have someone treat him like dirt and still work with him. He still remains focused on what he does. In my opinion, government is at its worst when there is general discord, where elected officials do not work together. There will always be and should be room for honest disagreement. However, the best in government is when we work together for common goals. With Brumby, working with others, which is what we are supposed to do for the betterment of our community, I am criticized and called the stealth mayor. Isn't working with others the best way to accomplish goals and projects? I have one vote, the same as each of the other 6 council members. That vote is no more important or less so than anyone else's. What is a common way that Mr. Brumby makes points to win a policy issue with which he disagrees? First, he mixes in some facts, tosses in some mud, and then tops it off with character attacks. I call it a coward's method of policy debate. Then after he's done his best to use character assassination, he deals with the policy issue. The honorable way to debate policy is alone on the merits or demerits of the policy, not by character attack and not by other unworthy methods. In a recent MDJ editorial, it noted that Governor Barnes lamented the downward trend in political discourse and quoted him, "I am very concerned that we have lost the ability to have civil discourse and public disagreements without attacks on the other person's character." I like the last paragraph in the editorial where it agreed with Barnes on discourse. Yes, I found it ironic that Mr. Brumby would agree when he is one of the largest abusers. To quote his editorial, "Agreed, our democracy is indeed frayed at the seams, if not tattered. There are many reasons for that, and they stretch back for decades. But one of the most obvious is a sort of uncivil personal attacks that have become part and parcel of today's political discourse, on the stump, on the airways, on the internet, and elsewhere." The editorial specifically left out the word newspapers. For the 30 years that I have been in the public arena, I have been the target of such uncivil personal attacks from some politicians, but especially from Otis Brumby Jr. and the Marietta Daily Journal. I have a question for Otis Brumby and the Marietta Daily Journal. Mr. Brumby, is this a change in the way that you will cover your news stories and editorials on the city of Marietta, as well as me? Do you agree with Barnes' comments enough to truly turn a new leaf and disagree agreeably? Do you agree to leave the character attacks alone? In closing, I would like to believe that Otis Brumby Jr. and the Marietta Daily Journal will have the courage and integrity to back up their words in their editorial and refrain from uncivil personal attacks. Unfortunately, and particularly in our hometown newspaper, I am afraid that Jefferson did have it right in 1806. As for what is not true, you will always find abundance in the newspapers.